Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. And the Cabinet Secretary said it's the first time we legislate on the Crown Estate, and I'm sure that's true, but it's certainly not the first time we debated. As Tavish Scott's just reminded us, on the 1st of November he held a members' debate, and indeed in 2012 David Stewart had a members' debate in this Parliament on the 18th of April. So, and I'm sure there will be other instances. The one in 2012, I simply have my file because, again, I happened to be the Minister who responded to that particular debate. So it's not a subject that we haven't debated before, discussed before, both on the floor and in the corridors of Parliament. Andy Whiteman took us back to the 900s. I hadn't realised it went quite that far back. I certainly found the Lords of Auditors of the Exchequer were established as a court in the 1500s to look after what is now the Crown Estate. So it's a very, very long history. The particular things about the bill that we are likely to pass in a short period of time. One of the ones which has simply not attracted any significant amendment, it was amended a little bit at stage 2, is section 11, which is the duty to obtain market value. And it basically picks up the existing provision. The manager of Scottish Crown Estate must not make any of the following transactions for consideration less than market value, but then goes on to qualify that by saying if the manager is satisfied the relevant transaction is likely to contribute to the promotion or improvement in Scotland of economic development, regeneration, social well-being, environmental well-being or sustainable development. I think that is a breakthrough provision, frankly, because it recognises that the assets that we are talking about, that we're managing, that we're allowing others to manage here, should be managed for the common good, not simply to deliver an economic asset that flows into the structures of government at all its various levels. So I'm particularly pleased with that particular section of the bill as it's been passed, although we've still got Section 7, duty to maintain and enhance value. Now, the Crown Estate has a long history. I've been here a fair while, not as long as quite everybody. John Scott, for example, looking around the chair, was here before I was, so was Tavish Scott. But in the earlier days of this Parliament, I don't think we could really say the Crown Estate engaged with members of this place to very useful purpose. I had a long-standing constituency case about persuading the Crown Estate to do something about a harbour at Crivy, and it took something like 5 or 6 years before we finally concluded it was actually their responsibility, and then a good deal longer before they actually did anything about it. But I think the Crown Estate, if they were anything, they were passively malign or passively neglectful. They were slightly better than other people, if the presiding officer allows me time.
John Scott.
I have to say, I object to your use of the word malign. I've objected to Mr Whiteman's use of the word malign too in the description of the Crown Estate managers hitherto who were entirely doing their job as they best saw fit and within the confines of the law entirely. And I know many of these people directly, and they are men and women of honour and declaring that interest. But I particularly object to the use of malign in that regard and in their respect. I'm sorry to be awkward about it again. I've already raised this point with Mr Whiteman, and I feel annoyed that it should have to be raised again.
Mr Stevenson.
Well, Mr Scott's perfectly entitled to make the point that he's just made. I will, however, say that I was pointing at the organisation rather than the individuals with whom I've always had the best of relationships and felt, as Mr Scott did, that as individuals they were doing the best, but the framework that constrained them did not let them do anything other than, in many instances, act in a way which one could describe as malign. But let's not fall out about a single word. It's simply not worth the hassle. There were private landowners around Scotland who were much, much worse. We used to go on holiday to Sutherland. The Vestes, who were domiciled in Argentina, never paid a penny of tax in decades, were much more adverse in the way they dealt with things. Now, I realise, Presiding Officer, I should be bringing things to a conclusion. Let me just say this is part of returning power to our communities. The David Stewart debate in April 2012, we all talked of Peter Peacock and of transfers that were made under community land Scotland. This is part of a process of restoring to the people of Scotland some of the assets which are rightly theirs and control over them. We haven't completed the journey, but it's a useful and helpful start. Presiding Officer.